Hey everyone, I'm Dave Sexton. This is my fifth video, my series of videos on reactive programming. So a couple of notes before we get started. In the previous video, Visual Studio crashed on me. What ended up happening was it crashed and then I actually started from where I left off, but I forgot to start recording. So a little chunk was missing, and in that chunk I actually introduced subject, but I introduced subjects very briefly anyway. So when I realized it wasn't recording and I started it again, I went back as far as I could, from memory to where just before where Visual Studio crashed, and I didn't quite go back far enough. I realized after I had finished the whole recording. So that's why it looked like there was a little jump there. What was missed was just a small explanation of what a subject is, and also a little bit of an experimentation of deriving from subject, which you used to be able to do, I think, but you can't anymore. I think it's sealed now. But anyway, and there's a subject-based class, but we wouldn't want to implement that either. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that it may have seemed a little surprising that I was just using a subject all of a sudden. I didn't explain it at all. The reason why I left it out also, and I'm not explaining it in this video either, is because I just don't think that it's all that important, really, to explain just yet. So it would have been a nice brief introduction in the previous video, but the fact that I didn't record myself talking about it, so be it, not a big deal. And in subsequent videos, there will be some usage of subject, of course. It will come up again, and I'll explain it at that point. So for now, if you're confused and you've used subjects before, or if you're waiting for some explanation on subject, please just realize that the first couple of videos, I didn't even use a subject or even mention it at all, and we started actually programming a business layer. So that should just give you some indication as to how useful subjects really are in the reactive-first world. But they serve a really useful purpose in bridging between object-oriented and reactive programming when you have no choice. And command implementation that we adapted was actually a pretty good use case for using a subject, and there are going to be others as well, like cross-cutting concerns, like when we start implementing diagnostics, for example. That's going to be another place where we'll probably want to use a subject, and that's probably actually the first place where I'll actually introduce it and maybe go into a little bit more detail than I would have in the previous video anyway. So that was the first note. And the second note was, in the previous video, I also planned on just doing like strict WPF work. The idea was I wanted to design from the outside in, right? Get rid of the interface, just sort of implement it and then move on, and then worry more about reactive stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of reactive problems we have to solve, even dealing with the interface and WPF as a presentation layer specifically. As you saw from the previous video, I had to create an adapter for command. We have to implement iNotify property change, which at some point we'll have to convert to an observable. That's easy. I just haven't done that yet. But the point is there's going to be other problems too, but we covered probably the most common two. And I just got sucked into that because that's kind of fun stuff to work on, and it's reactive stuff. So that wasn't the original plan. I really did want to design from the outside in and not keep getting caught up in building stuff. But that's the way it happens. So in this video, I'm really going to focus on just WPF work, I promise. So I'm not going to be doing any implementation in code. I'm going to try my best to just stay in XAML, and I really want to get most of the interfaces done based on the higher level requirements. So we'll look at the spec, get a feel for kind of what the UI is supposed to do, and I'm not going to implement navigation or anything like that. Nothing really behavioral is going to be done in this video, maybe even the next video too. I might get bored and just start go back to reactive programming in the next video or something, but we'll see. But I want to get as much of this designing from the outside in done as soon as possible, so that we can focus on really what's most interesting to us and what's most important for the purposes of this video, and that's the reactive-first approach. And just to be clear, when I say reactive-first, you might be surprised to find out that I think we should be designing XAML first. The reason why is, if I wasn't clear in the previous video, is because the reactive-first approach is for when you're actually implementing problems that have to do with input and output, and you could do that using objects or object-oriented programming, or just straight-up procedural programming, or reactive programming. We could use imperative or declarative styles. There's lots of choices there. What we're looking for is a declarative reactive style as our first attempt at implementing input and output, right? Implementing business rules and logic and interfaces in our APIs that can be used externally, and all of our contracts, like our invariants and so on. All of these things we're going to be thinking about from a reactive-first approach, and that's that doesn't mean that we shouldn't design from the outside in. It doesn't mean we shouldn't build the WPF app, build the XAML first in a WPF app and come up with a design that we think we want to actually use. It's very important to do that first. And then once we actually have to hook things up, I would jump from the presentation layer to the business layer and then to the service layer and make sure all the interfaces are correct, all the contracts are correct. We're going to be implementing the right thing. And then when we start implementing it, we're going to use reactive programming techniques to compose all of our observables together. So hopefully that gives you a better idea of my plan here and how we're going to actually implement the application. But this is also the reason why I'm stepping up to the presentation layer and I'm working on the XAML in this video, and I tried to in the previous video, because I want to make sure that we're building the right thing. Okay, so we could build all these beautiful observable queries that implement the business rules the way we see them, and then when we go to consume the APIs, we find out that we built the wrong thing, or they don't quite make sense based on the constraints in the presentation layer. You know, WPF requires things to be a certain way in some cases, like iCommand interface, for example. And you might find that it's much easier to do it in a certain way based on the presentation layer that you're in. Now, it is true that we want to build a business layer that's presentation layer agnostic and can work on, you know, for a mobile platform or desktop or web or whatever. But it's not necessarily going to be perfect, right? We're not going to get something that's the best possible design for every possible scenario, but we want to get something that's good enough. And I think the best way to do that is not to start by designing what we think is going to be good enough from the inside out, but designing from the outside in and seeing what it is that we actually want, at least from one example, one sample, which would be, in this case, WPF, and then generalize from there if we need to. So hopefully that's a good enough explanation. And I didn't leave a challenge, I think, in the previous video either, because it was more WPF. We did some reactive stuff, but I couldn't think of anything that was really worth challenging you with that wasn't going to be really strictly related to WPF. So I didn't leave a challenge, I believe. Okay, so let's start by closing some of these windows that we know we don't need now. So, for example, the spec and the connection view we could leave open. So we didn't actually finish the connection view, right? We have a simple implementation with a username and a service URL, but I know the spec had some other things in it, like password, right? But only in certain scenarios. Probably just want to reuse this control and use some kind of trigger or flag or something to determine when I want to switch between showing a password and not showing a password. And we probably want a little place to show an error message, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to throw controls in for all of those things now. So let's see what we need. The first thing we see here is that the user can set their username. Right, we have that completed, username. Service URL is below that, and service URL. And click a connect button. We've done that. When the connect button is pressed, the username is valid and the service URL is a valid URI. Then we disable the connect button, which is fine. Our command, remember, has the ability to change the enabled or disabled state of the button together with the or it's paired together with the execute method, right? So we have the can execute and execute. So that's you know, an interface that's already exists. We could just depend on that one. Displaying a waiting animation and a cancel button. So a waiting animation and a cancel button. So we'll definitely need something like that. So while it's attempting to connect, we're going to hide the connect button, which will again happen automatically because of the command binding. So we're going to need another button here, which we could just put in the same row, and we'll call this one cancel. And what we could do here is we'll set the visibility to be bound to, to be bound to itself and its own isEnabled property. Right, so we'll say binding, and then relative source is going to be self. Relative source. Oh, I can't type today. Wonderful. Relative source self, and the converter is going to be a static resource, which will be a Boolean to visibility converter. And this is going to be a pretty common one, so let's put that in our XAML file, our app XAML file, so it's available to all XAML files in the app. So this will be Boolean to visibility converter, and its key is the same, eponymously named. Okay, so this means that when it's enabled, it will be visible, and when the command disables it, we'll actually hide it. So that way we could still bind to the command will control everything, and then this visibility binding will react to changes of the command. So this is reactive, right? Triggers and WPF are sort of reactive as well, but it's declarative, right? It's just not using generalized operators. It's very specific properties that allow bindings to react to one another, right? And triggers, which we haven't gotten to, but I'm sure we'll use some triggers at some point. Cancel will be the same or similar. I'll copy this. So the cancel command by default will be disabled, and when it disables connect, the code behind, or the view model, will disable the connect button and then enable the cancel button. And when this becomes enabled, it will become visible. Okay, that looks good. And this is going to be cancel. So now we have connect and cancel, and they'll swap out. And what was the other thing? Waiting animation. All right, we don't have to do an animation, really. I mean, I don't want to waste time doing that. I could find a GIF online or something, but I don't want to waste any time doing that. For now, the cancel button, the fact that it's cancel is showing, will actually be our indicator that something's happening. Maybe in the future, if we want to pretty up the application, we could throw an animation in there or create our own or something. Try connecting to the specified URL. If the connection cannot be established or it's invalid, display any network service or URL validation errors. So we need some place to actually display errors as well. We could do this, excuse me, we could do this maybe externally as well. This view is going to be hosted by the main window. Showing errors maybe in like a status bar or something would be kind of nice. So we could actually use reactive programming for that as well. The main window could display, could have a status bar that reacts to changes in a, really it's a cross-cutting concern, right? So it could be some sort of external observable. And anyway, that could be interesting. Let's go with that. Let's go with that idea for now. So we'll need 2 rows, and the bottom row will be our status bar, and the height of that one will be auto, so it collapses. So the status bar is in the bottom, which you can't see here. In the window, it doesn't like for some reason, but the view, but that's fine. And, oh, actually I have to make this grid row is 1. 0. Oh, now it likes it. It's still got that little error thing here. I don't know why. Or warning, but whatever. It doesn't matter. So, oh, maybe because it's not actually compiled yet? I don't remember. Doesn't matter. So we have the username, service URL, cancel, connect buttons that swap out, and errors will be shown in a status bar, which we can't see here, but we'll just, oops. Is it, do I need a label? Yeah, I'll just put a text block. And we could set the status to testing. Yep, so you could see it. Let's put a binding here that will be errors. How about errors? That's fine. We could use an items control as well, and that way we could have errors be an actual collection. Or in the code beyond, we could deal with concatenating errors as needed. I'm not really, I don't really care that much either way, frankly. So let's go with this way for now. It's a little simpler. So this will be our string property or something, which is a list of errors. And perhaps if we're connected, it would be nice to show that here as well. I don't know. Well, I'm not going to add stuff that we don't necessarily need. We'll add it later if we want it. Okay, so there's errors. Focus the service URL and select it, which is a text box. We could do that. That's behavior, so we're going to skip that for now, right? We just want to make sure the UI covers all the state that we might want to deal with, and the behaviors could be added later. If the cancel button is pressed, cancel the connection attempt, try disconnecting, log any errors, enable the connect button, so that's the toggling back again. If the service requires authentication, prompt the user to enter a password. Now we need a password. So in this case, we could just add another dock panel here, right? And we'll add another row here. We'll keep it as auto as well. This will be row 0, 1, 2. 0, 1 is auto, 2 is auto. I don't see why. Oh, because these are 2 also. I forgot. And oh, I see why, because this was an error. So vertical alignment center, margin 5, left, service URL is actually password. I wonder if we just make it where the password's always visible by default. I guess it doesn't really matter now. It's a behavior. We could worry about that later. So we could actually use a password box for this, which is pretty common, but we're not going to be able to use a binding then. I believe it doesn't support bindings. Yeah. So for that reason, usually you work around this. Sometimes you create like a attached property. I've worked around it like 4 different ways, right? I think we all have. I think the best way to do this for now is just to leave it alone. I won't have any binding on here at all. And I'll use the code behind to extract the password. And we don't need to do everything as a binding, right? That doesn't make sense. Bindings are supposed to be useful to us and helpful. If we have to bend over backwards to make this bindable, then it defeats the purpose, right? So I'll just go through the code behind probably at some point in the future to extract the password. And also, we don't want the password to always be visible, or do we? I don't know. I'm thinking we don't have to require a password unless the server says, you know, it challenges the user with a password. I mean, that's the way I define the spec, right? If the service requires authentication, it will, you know, this is implied, it will send a message back to the client, and then the client will prompt the user for a password. I guess leaving the socket connection open, or we could use like HTTP as like the negotiation protocol or something, and then switch over to a WebSocket after. I don't know. We'll figure that stuff out later. But I think from a designing from the outside perspective, this is good enough, and we can take the next step and hide the password box by default. If we well, yeah, let's just hide it by default. I think that's a good idea, but I've been proven wrong before. So I think I want to bind. Well, so when I say hide it by default, I really just mean that we're going to bind the visibility to some property that could change later on the view model, and then control the visibility of this field, right? Rather than it just always being visible like the ones above it. So the binding could be show password or something like that, and the converter again is a Boolean to visibility converter. And if we want the UI to play nicely with this, I wonder if it will in this case. I bet it would. Let's try this just out of curiosity. If we go to, because I can never remember this stuff, connection view model, if we actually add a property on this thing called show password, and I'm just going to set it to false for now, even though we will change that at some point, I think the designer will hide that field. 2 succeeded, and yeah, that works. Oh, on the main window it works. Connection view. Yeah, it works here too. Very good. So now, if we remove this, it shows it, and it hides it. Yeah, looks good. So back to the spec. If the server requires authentication, the show password becomes true. The user can enter the password. What I don't have in the spec, and this is why it's good to design from the outside, is how do they submit their password? All they'll have here is a cancel button, right? So we will need another button here and another observable, right, of notifications that say that the user is trying to submit a password, which could happen multiple times in the lifetime of the app, because the app might the connection might get disconnected, and then they'll have to re-enter the password again. So this could be an observable as well. So now if it's a cancel, you know what? What's interesting is I think in this case, we might actually want to show the password button and the cancel button at the same time. So I'm going to just make that assumption at the moment. Right, so these are now in a stack panel. And you know, actually, vertical alignment top could be also moved here. And orientation is horizontal. Good. So now this one is not going to be cancel. It's going to be submit, I guess. Submit password, right? Yeah, why not? And what about these text boxes? You know, they should be disabled as well, right? Is enabled binding. Can enter username. How about, or is username editable? Is username editable? Yeah, I like that. And this one's going to be is service URL editable. All right, good enough for me. Now, down here we have submit. The command is going to be submit password, which will be obvious in context now because password is going to be the only box you could type in, right? In this case, horizontal alignment center. Looks good. So there's our submit cancel buttons. And I think that's good enough. Yeah. So back to the spec. So we could send the password. If the server rejects the password, enable the connect button, which we now know means actually disabling both submit password and cancel because they appear on top of connect, and also enabling the connect button. Okay. Oh, and also enabling the username and service URL, right? And disabling password or setting show password to false, actually. So, yeah, a bunch of stuff has to happen there. Oh, you know, this is enabled here. Oh, yeah, I don't want to change the visibility. I like is enabled. So that way you'll see the username and service URL text boxes, but they'll be disabled. But you'll at least still see them. So we're not going to change the visibility of these. They're a permanent fixture in this UI, I think. Okay, so spec. Back to the spec. It says otherwise change the connect button into a disconnect button and enable it. Now, this is interesting because disconnect is really going to be a button that's on a different view. This is like the let's wait until we're logged in view, and then once you're logged in, this view goes away entirely. So disconnect is like a whole separate animal, right? So we'll have to put that in the main view or the chat view or whatever we call it. And then enable the chat GUI, which is also, so again, this disconnect button is really going to be part of the chat GUI, I would think. And then save the username and service URL in the user's preferences. So this is another sort of behavior that's going to happen from as a consequence of business code, right? I don't think the UI is going to do this. This is going to be a business layer requirement. We might have some abstraction for what it means to save preferences in the business layer. It doesn't know what that means. It's just going to have a contract that says that tells some other component to do the saving, right? But the business layer will control that. So this isn't a UI requirement. So then when the disconnect button is pressed, we disable it, try disconnecting the specified URL. If the program fails to disconnect gracefully, log errors and continue, change the disconnect button into a connect button and enable it, go to number 2, and disable the chat GUI. So to me, this means essentially swapping whatever that chat GUI is going to be with this connection view again. So when they disconnect, it just comes back to this view. So pretty simple. I think this is good enough. I think this covers all bases. We even, I noticed something that I missed in the first place, submitting a password. So the spec was incomplete. There's going to be many places, I'm sure, where the spec is incomplete. And this is one of the reasons why it's good to design from the outside. There will hopefully be, you'll see probably many reasons why that's good as we continue this process. So there's connection view. And now I think we could look at building the chat GUI. There's not many GUIs in this, or not many views, I should say, in this application, is there? And feature-wise, there's really only 2 high-level features, right? It's connecting to a server and then chatting. So as far as views are concerned, it doesn't, really make sense to organize by feature or by view. I think just grouping them all together in a folder is good enough. So I'm going to take the simple route and just create another view here, which is going to be the chat GUI view for now. There might be a couple other pop-ups we want in the future, configuration pop-up or something like that, whatever. But that's going to be easy to do, I think. Also, just in the same model here, there's only going to be a handful of views that we have to deal with, so it doesn't really matter. And we could be... Oh, so there is built-in navigation controls, like pages they're called, I think. Yeah, pages. We could be doing it that way too, now that I think about it. Well, I'm okay with creating user controls instead for now. We could always create, when we decide to do navigation, however we decide to do it, we can, if we want to use the page functionality built into WPF, then we could just drop a user control in the page. So I don't think it matters how we do it. User control is just going to be the most flexible way. So we don't necessarily have to use pages. We could come up with our own navigation implementation. Actually, I might do that. Who knows? So let's call this, how about chat? Is that too vague? Chat, this is a chat application. Well, it's really the only place where you can actually chat. So let's call it chat for now. Oh, and view, right? I've been putting the word view after everything, or at least in this first example. Okay, so chat view. We have a connection view model. We'll have a chat view model, but I am determined not to do anything regarding implementation in this video, so I will not create the view model, even though most likely we will have one at some point. As a matter of fact, we might even have a type related to this view, although it might just be user, actually. User might have a user view model, and that might be the view model for the chat view. That might actually make sense, but anyway, we'll see. So it doesn't really matter. At this point, we're designing from the outside, so let's keep focused. What does this chat thing have to do? Well, let's drop this in the main window now, because why not? Actually, well, the connection view is always going to be the first thing, so I'm just going to leave the main window alone for now, actually. And the spec really goes to here for receiving messages. The only thing we have to keep track of here is the disconnect, right? So the disconnect button will appear in our chat GUI. I forgot about the startup. Cross-cutting concerns we don't care about yet. User preferences, right? We'll have a view for that, I'm sure, at some point. Sound is available. Yeah. Chat GUI elements are disabled. Yeah, see, so this is a requirement that doesn't quite... I mean, it's one of those things where putting it in there depends... It's sort of thinking agnostic, like it doesn't depend on any particular presentation layer or presentation framework. But in reality, in a mobile device, you're probably not going to see the whole application, right? You're going to have pages. In a desktop app, you might. It might not make sense to do it the way I'm doing it, but I'm just thinking more modern terms now, right? We'll have a connection screen, and then when you connect, it shows you the actual GUI rather than just having like a old school app where everything is in the one interface, right? I want to do something a little bit nicer. So, but this kind of way of thinking where everything's sort of in one interface at least conveys the idea that you shouldn't be able to chat at this moment. And whether or not we actually end up coding that as a business rule remains to be seen. It might not actually matter based on what we actually want designing from the outside in, right? We might not care about this rule because it might not apply because we have a separate way of connecting, right? So, sorry, a little arbitrary tangential thought there, but okay. So let's drop down to the receiving messages, and before I do anything in the UI, I just want to review this real quickly. Let's see if there's anything that's worthy of paying attention to. So when a message is received, if the user's status, there's the first thing, status. So we'll probably want to show that in the status bar. And the user should be able to change their status. I believe that was actually a feature. That would have been in the feature document, I believe. Features. Status. Yeah, display a list of users currently connected to the chat, including name and status. That's part 2. Client features part 1, change status without disconnecting. Busy status will block all messages, right? So I knew we wanted to be able to change the status. So again, I think we're talking main window stuff here. Let's just drop into the main window, status bar, and perhaps we could show it as like a combo box. And for now, I'll just hard code it. The selected item will actually be a string probably, and it will be called status. And then we'll have items here, which could just be strings, right? Let's just make them strings for now. Where's MS Core Lib system? That's weird. I thought, wasn't MS Core Lib system? Come on. Is system automatically in scope now? I don't think so. I always used to put system in there. Yeah. Because I always use the namespace like sys. Am I missing something here? System. It's only giving me value tuple. It's not Win32. Yeah, usually it says system MS Core Lib, doesn't it? I feel like I'm missing something obvious here. Well, I guess technically I could just do this, and then I don't see why I have to rely on IntelliSense. I guess I don't. This is what I'm expecting to see. Let's see if it works. Sys string. Yeah, I don't know why it didn't show that in the list of options, but anyway, this is good enough for now, so let's go with this. We'll say, I don't know, available, or how about online, busy, away, and offline, something like that. Offline would probably be first, right? Alright, we'll come up with those later, but just to get an idea of how we want this to look. And if we go down here, there's our drop down. Of course, there is no selected item by default because status doesn't exist, but it would say offline here. And it would have to be controlled a little bit, right? So it's not always enabled. It's only enabled once you're actually online. So by default, your status is offline until you become online. Then it switches to online, or if there's some setting that makes it always go to busy or away or something like that, it would, it would control that. But here we clearly need some way of describing whether status is enabled or not. So how about status is enabled? We could bind that to a property in the view model whenever it is that we go ahead and create a view model for the window. That looks pretty good. And then what about orientation? I'm thinking status. Oops. What just happened there? Yeah. I think status should maybe go to the right. Status bar item. Is it a header or something? It's not a header item. It doesn't let me align it right? How do you do that? I could have sworn there was a way to do that. There's no attachable properties, right? No. Horizontal alignment right. I guess I'm wrong. What about stretch? No. Is there a tray? No. Huh. I'm finding that to be kind of strange, actually. Alright, well, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank here, but I don't have to create two status bars. I guess I could just create two status bars. Oh no, but then I'm still going to run into the same issue. Even if I chop this in half, then it's just going to be flush left here. There must be a way to make this go right. What if well, obviously this isn't going to make a difference. Now the whole status bar itself is centered, right? If I did right, that doesn't work either. Did I try stretch already? Just out of curiosity? Yeah, that doesn't work. So, yeah, I'm a little confused here. Anyway, I'm going to leave this for now. I don't think it's that big of a deal. So it's showing on the left, fine. But we'll rearrange the status bar so it looks nicer in the future. But that has our status selection. So if the user status is not busy and the message matches the user's current filter criteria, append the message to the message list. So we need some formatting for each message, right? The date and or time based on the user's current preferences. The message has to be rendered in a font with a particular size and a particular color received with the message. So because we have formatting requirements, I think it makes sense to use a flow document. So let's go with that for now. That will give us the control we need. I guess technically it could be a rich text box. Oh, well, a flow document will be a little cheaper, I think, right? Well, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to be editable anyway. A flow document, I believe, still lets you select text and copy it, which is fairly important, I think. But we could test that out. So let's start with a flow document. Flow document scroll viewer. And then the document will be a flow document. Okay, so now we see flow document in there. And do a little formatting. There's not much to see in the designer anyway, so for now that's good. And then in the flow document, let's just have a little example here of what we might expect. So we'll have a section, a paragraph. So this is the kind of stuff we'll render for each message, right? Like a paragraph. And inside the paragraph will be a run. In this case, you know, it would be something like Dave, hello world. And we could put that in a particular style. Maybe it would be more like this. I will probably bold that, and then the text will be not bold. Yeah, that looks pretty good, right? Something like that. And the paragraph's foreground color will be decided by the thing. And the section's background color will also be decided by by thing I meant user preferences. But yeah, so I think this is pretty good. And then we'll have a second paragraph. And this could be, maybe somebody chose their color to be blue, and their font size to be 15, and their font family to be Seago UI. This is going to be, I don't know, Pam says. Actually, wouldn't it be Earth that would be responding? Well, that is not too egotistical, is it? Earth is responding to me. Maybe it's not me. It's somebody else named Dave. It's a very popular name, right? Okay, so that's pretty good, I think. We'll use a flow document, and we obviously need some way to build this stuff up, though, dynamically. So we need some sort of binding. What we could do, actually, is just bind the document property to a flow document, to a property on the view model, which will just provide a flow document. And then that way, in the code, in the view model, it will have a reference to the flow document, and it will just mutate the flow document. As messages arrive, it will create a new paragraph, insert it into the main section, etc. That's probably the best way to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare ourselves to do that. So it's going to be something like chat document. Okay, I'm okay with that. And then now we no longer need this, actually, this inner part. That was a good little experiment there just to see what it might look like. Oh, also, though, you know what I just forgot? I noticed it, but for some reason I wasn't paying attention. This margin is annoying me. Is it padding? Page padding is 0. Ah, there we go. Yeah, page padding. Is there also a margin? I don't think so. Yeah, just padding. Maybe we could have some padding. I think I'd rather have that as 0 and then have the border thickness as 0, if it's not already. Right, and this doesn't have a border. No. Yeah, so that way, if we want some margin or border or whatever, we could do it outside of this control. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Okay, so let's also redo this thing here now, where we had the binding, which I cut into my clipboard. So there's our flow document scroll viewer with the binding to chat document, and that will serve as the content of our chat. We'll obviously need a way to send a message, but I don't think oh, that's here, sending message. Yes, I don't think we reviewed that yet, but we covered this part, right? You could render it with date and time, and whatever the formatting is and stuff is controlled completely in the view model. So we solved that problem. If the user status is not busy, again, logic controlled in the view models. Actually, this is more like business layer logic, right? And if the option to play a sound is enabled and the chat window is not currently focused, play a configured sound. That's more presentation layer stuff, but well, I guess the business layer could technically control that too, but it would just need some abstract interface in order to invoke, playing a sound. We'll probably do something like that once we get to it. But for now, we could skip it. I don't think it's all that important. So let's see, sending a message when the enter key is pressed or the send button is clicked. So we're going to need a send button and clearly a text box to enter a message. Do we want it to be a text box or a formatable box, right? Where you could actually sort of preview exactly the font size and color that you're choosing. I think the latter sounds better to me, so we'll probably want to do something like that. So we know we're going to need some placeholders, or excuse me, some organization here, some placement of these things relative to each other. I'm just going to do a stack right now. It's pretty common for chat applications, right? So the bottom row will be auto height, and that way, this one I know you don't have to set the grid, but I just like consistency, so I'm a stickler for that. I always put grid row 0 and grid column 0 and things like that. So, and then on the bottom we'll have our. So this is the interesting part. We want some way of representing the view of our code so that it looks, not our code, excuse me, of our message, right? So that it looks like the way we've designed it. But we could actually do that in the text box itself. So here's the thing. I don't want to make this a rich text box because then we have to deal with pasting and, excuse me, and the complex editing involved, and essentially it just generates a flow document. This is not what we want. We want a text message with formatting, plus formatting. So to have a very simple, straightforward text message that's easily editable and feels like a nice, clean text box, I'm just going to use the text box. And then we'll set the style of the text box to whatever the user chooses. And that is definitely controllable, right? Font size and color. We could do all three of those. So let's just go with a regular text box, actually. I think that makes more sense, but we'll see. And the grid row is 1. And now that should just be docked to the bottom. There you go. Oh, actually, though, we're going to have a send button, too, or at least I wanted one. So let's use a dock panel here instead. And this is going to be grid row 1. And the text box will take up the full width. So by default, the last child fill is enabled. So we have to put the send button first, even though we want to dock to the right. And we'll say dock panel.dock equals right. And let's see, its content will be send. Yep, there we go. It's, like I said, I promised you it will be ugly, and it is ugly, but it will serve our purpose. And we can prettify this later. Prettify? Make it to make pretty? I don't know. Anyway, we'll make it beautiful later. So we'll need a command for this, right? We'll say, why not send message? That seems reasonable. And when you click send message, it will send. There will be some validation on this as well. Oh, we could also, so this is an interesting part. We actually need to be able to send, oh, okay, so I was going to say we could set the command parameter to send the message along with it, but then it's just going to be text, right? We will need some way of extracting the style from the text box as well, or at least even setting the style based on other options. As a matter of fact, in that case, we'll already have those options in the view model. Oh yeah, so we really could just do this. Command binding is going to be the text property of the element name, which is message. Ah, come on. Name equals message. Could just do that. Then we don't have to worry about, this is actually supposed to be command parameter, excuse me. Right, then we don't have to worry about another property called message. Although maybe another property called message would be useful, right? Oh, actually, maybe we want to clear the message. So yeah, you know what? Having control over the message in the view model might actually be useful. So I take it back. I'm just going to go with that instead. So there you go. So they're orthogonal. When send message is clicked, an event will be raised. We're going to end up converting that to an observable, of course, because actually it's an I command. Excuse me, not an event. So the I command notation, we already have an I observable for that. So we'll just subscribe to this send message command, but it's not going to carry any data for us, right? So what we'll have to do is project it, probably using the select operator, with whatever the message is in the text box. Now we'll have an I observable of string, and then we'll probably want to enhance that further. Maybe we'll just do it all in the same select, where we create some other data type that combines the string message and the formatting information into a single type that we can or a single notification, right? So an iObservable of this special type that contains the message. We'll probably just call it a message, right? It makes more sense. So we'll probably have a type called message or something like that. But anyway, just thinking ahead, just making sure that from the design perspective, this is what we want and it's easily implemented. Now let's go to the next part here, which is a little bit of formatting, because this is not exactly what we want. The text box also has to be multi-line, perhaps, right? I don't see why not. Actually, we could even make it also that you could resize it if you want. There was no explicit requirement for that, but I don't see why we wouldn't do that. Seems reasonable to me. So let's add a grid splitter here. Its row will be 1. I like creating splitters in their own rows. I find that to be a little easier to work with. I don't know why. Personal preference, I guess. So let's set the height to 7 or 8. That's what I usually use, but then I always end up changing it anyway. But I always start there with 7 or 8. And let's see. I can never remember the property name. I don't know why. It always eludes me. I always have to search for through the whole list for the property again. I kind of get the feeling it was down here near the bottom for some reason. Resize, behavior, and direction. That's it. I don't know why. I can never remember that. Okay, resize behavior will be previous and next. And I'm always explicit about this because, why not? Again, it's not that big a deal. But all right, and the background, for now, I'm just going to keep it a very ugly gray. And why does it not show in gray there? You think it would be obvious. Is it foreground? Height is... Row is 1. Height is 7. Previous and next rows. Background is red. Huh. Oh, it's all the way to the right there. That's why. Okay, so that was the trick there. So now we can leave the background. I'll change the color, obviously. Let's put this back to gray. There we go. Beautifully ugly. Okay. And yeah, 7 is always too high. I always do that. 5. Well, maybe it's not. I guess it depends. Let's leave it at 5 for now. This is 100%, yeah, so it looks a little thick. Oh, I forgot. My resolution's pretty terrible for the video. I leave it at 1280 by 700, I think, something like that. So maybe this looks a lot thicker than it normally would. I don't know. Anyway, I'll leave this for now. It's good enough. So what else with the text box that I want to do? All right, so it accepts return, but you could actually change the size of this, right? So if we were to, say, set the height to, I don't know, 200 because we dragged it up, yeah, the text box fills it. But the send button gets all weird. So let's fix that. Although maybe that's fine. I think I'd rather have the send button just sort of set to the top, I guess. Yeah, it's ugly either way, so. Padding is going to be 3. Yeah. It looks a little better, but okay. I think this is fine. So this is the default. Oh, and I probably should set the min height on this then. Equals, I want that value. So I'm just going to inch up until it looks like it grows. Yeah, 60 is too high. So it's 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Oh, 25 it grew, I think, right? 24, 25 it grew, 24 it doesn't. So that's 24 it is. So that's the minimum height. So that's like the size of a regular text box. And then you can grab the splitter and drag it up, and it will look like this. And accepts return is true, which means it accepts multiple lines. Do we want to accept tab? Nah, not for now. You know what? Maybe maybe we could accept tab. Nobody's going to hit tab when they're typing in a chat, right? To tab to the send button. I'm going to accept tab. We can always change that if it's frustrating to people. Okay. So there's accepts return, accepts tab. And I think that's it, right? And we need some way of dealing with styling, actually. I forgot about that. So yeah, let's do the styles. So we need some way of setting the styles. How about we have a stack panel here where the dock panel, it's docked to the left. And its vertical alignment is to the top. So it's similar to the send button, but on the left side. Yeah, that seems reasonable. So, oh, and the orientation will be horizontal. Now, there's three things. So we'll have, I guess what I really want is a combo box. You know what we could do? We could just have a single button where you click it and it pops up a view that lets you set your message style, or it expands below the text box with the information. Right? I don't want to have like multiple combo boxes here or something. You have to drop down. It just takes up way too much space that way. Actually, something under the text box might not be so bad. Because I hate pop-ups. I want to avoid that if we could avoid pop-ups. And sliding out some other interface on top of this is weird. It's annoying. I think sliding this up and just having something appear below it is probably pretty good. Yeah, you know what? I'm not opposed to that. I think let's try that now. I'm not opposed to my own idea. See? Let's see how that works out. So we're gonna have a button on the left side, and it's similar to this. Might as well even keep the same padding for now. So what's the difference here? Content is going to be style. Yeah. Before we even get into that, this is really going to be a toggle button. Yeah, I'm not sure putting the style button here is the best approach. And maybe even the word style is kind of annoying, right? Yeah, maybe we'll turn this into an icon later, like some sort of magic wand or something image. I don't know, something like that. But anyway, for now, I think this is good enough. So I want something here. S is kind of ambiguous because of send, right? It's also _S. So how about I, because it's vertical and thin. So we're taking up less space. Although if it's a magic wand image, it's going to be something like a slash or something, right? Yeah. All right, let's leave that for now. It's good enough. So you click this, and it's going to make a visible panel, make a panel appear, and that panel will be, oh, come on. That panel will be a, oh, you know, it could be I just realized it could be an expander, which might be kind of nice. It doesn't really have to be an expander. So maybe I'll just keep it as a dock panel for now. Actually, a grid would be nice because then it's 3 separate panels. So I need something for font, size, and color, right? That's it. Font, size, and color. All right, let's use a grid for now. And we'll just use column definitions. 3 equal column definitions. One will be a combo box for font, you know, something like that. One will be a combo box for size, and one for color. Oh, do we also want to support bold, italic, and underlined? In that case, also rich text box is nice, but yeah, I don't know. I think even though if I want to support that with oh, but you know what's interesting? If we support bold, italics, and underline, then you'd be able to do it in portions of the full message, right? This part's bold, this part's italics, this part's underline. And if you could do that, then our message is not just a simple string. It's actually a series of runs, which are each formatted independently, potentially. And that's more complicated. That's not that we can't do that, but I want to draw a line here because I want to spend a lot more time dealing with reactive problems and not building a really nice chat app. So I think this is good enough if we just stick with this simple text message, and there won't be any support for bold, italic, or underline, and no support for colors of like individual characters or anything like that. If we wanted to do that, we would use probably a rich text box would be the best approach. But I'm going to go with the very simple and restrictive approach right now of just choosing a single font, size, and color, which will apply to every character in the message. And the message itself is really just a string, a raw string. Okay. So that means that our selected item here will be a font family name. Font family. Oh, Visual Studio's frozen again. Uh-oh. Oh, good. I thought it was going to crash. That's happened before. Okay, and then so that'll be a font family, selected item. This will be a font size. Yep. And selected item will be a, not index, item. Will be foreground, which is really the foreground color, right? Or brush in this case, right? So that means this would have to be a list of brushes. I mean, it doesn't have to be this way, but why not? So color is going to be, we'll have red. We'll start out with black, red, green, right? And these don't have to be hard coded. We could actually bind these. It's an items control, right? We could bind the item source to some property from somewhere else. Even let the user decide what colors they want. We could have a nice color control. It's a color picker, whatever. But we don't really have to worry about all that at the moment. At some point, we probably will add that kind of stuff. And this is grid row 3, actually. Yeah, there we go. Looks much better now. So we have this drop down here, which has colors in it. Selected item is some color. Fine. Also, instead of just the solid color brush, I'm thinking maybe the items should be a little different. It should be like combo box item. Items will be combo box items where the tag is some color, like xstatic colors dot green, and then that way we could set the background to the same color so you could actually visualize it. Yeah, I like that. It's going to be black and red. Yeah, see, so now you can see all three of them. Content equals black. Yeah, looks good. Perhaps the foreground should be white. Yeah. All right, that looks good. Good enough for now, anyway. And the font size, I'm just trying to make sure from the outside in, right, we could support all these features. And obviously we can very easily. Font size will be a list of font sizes, which could just be double values, right? Yeah. We have sys here now. Oh, no, I don't. This is a different view. System, MS Corelib, see? I swore it was there before. Why wasn't it there in the previous view? I have no idea. Anyway, it's there now, so who cares? Okay, so the, let's see, the double value will be 12. And we could pick 14 point. I mean, I hate UIs that are this restrictive, so don't get me wrong. Obviously, we'll support like a text box version of this as well, but these are just like perhaps common sizes that you might choose, right? So that'd be selected item. I forgot how to set that. It's like is drop down or something. Is editable. That's it. And then is read only is false. I don't remember the actual combinations we'll need for that, but okay, good enough. So this will let you type in a double and or select a double, I believe. We'll see about that. All right. And then font family. I guess, yeah, same thing. You'll be able to type it in. This will just be a string, right? Yeah, sure, why not? Seago UI. You know, I don't know, Courier New. What other fonts are there? Seago UI symbol. Yeah, I don't know many font names anymore. I forgot them all. Alright, that's good enough. And what's the problem with this? They're column definitions, but I forgot to set the columns. Column is 0. Again, I just, for consistency, making sure everything is set to the right column, but it doesn't have to be, of course. Alright, that looks good. So there's our colors, our doubles. I'm not sure why that's not dropping down. This one drops down, but these don't. Is that because this is editable? Editable? Nope, just doesn't want to drop down. Is that because these are not combo box items? You know, I don't know. But doesn't matter. Okay, so those are our 3 things. And then we'll probably have to restyle this because I want the selected color to be shown here too. I'm not sure that it will be. Actually, I'm pretty sure it won't be, but we'll see about that. Okay, what else? So the visibility of this. Right. So the visibility of this has to be controlled based on the toggle button. So maybe we'll create a little trigger for this one. Style target type is grid. Let's see, style triggers. We'll have a data trigger. Oh, it doesn't even have to be a data trigger. Oh, I think it might have to be. Oh, all right. Let's just go data trigger, and its binding will be the is. What is the toggle button? Is it is? It's not is pressed, right? Is checked. Duh, I forgot. Okay. Is checked, and value is true. Then the visibility will be visible. But by default, so that's what we will see here. But by default, property visibility is going to be collapsed. There we go. So it's hidden. So now, if we set this to be is checked as true. Oh, well, it's not executing the trigger, I guess. You know, I really thought it would. Oh, duh, I forgot the name. This is going to be, how about just show styles? Element name equals show styles. There we go. Now it's visible. So now if we get rid of is checked, it hides. Perfect. So when you click this button, it toggles on, it shows the styles. If you click it again, it toggles off and the styles go away. Again, not a first-class UI, but good enough for now. So I think this is probably a good place to stop. And I know I didn't get a lot of stuff done or a lot of fun stuff done, but we're pretty close to finishing up all the UIs, so all the GUI parts of it. So that's not too bad. I think we're going to have to finish this one up in the next video, which shouldn't take long, and then we'll also deal with the main window a little bit more, probably some other bells and whistle kind of stuff, and then maybe the user preferences window. So maybe one more video or so, or probably 2 or something, to get the GUI done. But maybe I won't do them all consecutively. Like I said, I don't want to bore everyone with this stuff. So let's see. I'm not sure what I'm going to do in the next video. Whether I'll continue with WPF or actually jump back to the business layer. Maybe jumping around is more interesting. I could honestly say that building a real app, if this was a professional app, I would totally jump around also. I mean, I would try to design from the outside in, but you know, I don't necessarily design everything from the outside first. I might do this UI and then design the business layer for this part of the UI and then design the service layer for this part of that. You know, and if you have teams building in parallel, they might depend on you to actually start building certain things out, and if that's the case, you might be forced to build out one thing before another. So prioritization of things tends to be sort of messy, and it's really hard to stick to a very clean plan. So maybe I will jump around just because it's pretty common anyway. We don't have to complete all of the GUIs on the first try or in a row. So I'll think about that. And I think, like I said before about the leaving you with a challenge, I don't really see any good challenges that I could leave for you here, because we are talking about WPF and nothing really reactive. So I'm going to leave you without a challenge again, but hopefully in a video sooner rather than later, we'll be back into the reactive world, and I'll be able to come up with some interesting challenges for you. So I think that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.